I call the member for Page.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I welcome and strongly support these bills. And recently I put out a statement at home where I said a number of things, and I'll repeat some of those here. And I said that the Road Safety Remuneration Bill will save lives by ensuring that truck drivers are paid reasonably for the work they do, and it will get rid of the economic incentive for truck drivers to take unacceptable risks on our roads. I've been a strong supporter of the Transport Workers Union campaign for safe rates in the trucking industry, and also strongly supportive of the efforts that the government has made to deliver this. We know that around 250 people are killed and more than 1,000 suffer serious injuries on our roads each year in accidents involving trucks. And in our region, where I live in the Northern Rivers region, we know all too well the high toll of accidents involving trucks on our roads. In 2008, the National Transport Commission's review into payment methods in the industry found a link between rates of pay and safety outcomes for truck drivers. The TWU and industry representatives were on the government's Safe Rates Advisory Committee and have been consulted every step of the way in this legislation, and there was a consultation period. Truck drivers, and that is employees or owners, they're still truck drivers, should not have to speed, overload their trucks or drive excessive hours to earn a decent living. Truck drivers work hard enough to make a living, and the government wants to support measures that ensure pay rates that encourage drivers to drive safely, manage their hours and maintain their vehicle. And that's reasonable. And I want to also add a few, firstly I wanted to say there was a TWU campaign that's gone on for some years, and I participated in a lot of those activities that were held in my electorate in Page, and we got great support from the community, from the public, because they all know that truck drivers have to be on the road, and they know that they want them to drive safely, and that we have to have a system, a framework and laws where they're necessary to make sure that that can happen. And that's what these bills do. And just quoting from some quotes here in the document, the Safe Rates Summit 2011 document, and it says here, Andrew Phillis, former driver, evidence to the New South Wales Industrial Relations Commission. And I quote, he says, when I was required to perform excessive hours, I would sometimes experience a state of mind that I can only describe as hallucinations, which I considered to be due to sleep deprivation. I would see trees turning into machinery which would lift my truck off the road. I saw myself run over motorcycles, cars and people. On one occasion, I held up the highway in Grafton's in my seat of Page, while waiting for a truck which was not there to do a 3-point turn. I was radioed by drivers behind me, asking why I had stopped. I estimate that I had experiences like these roughly every second day. They were not an uncommon thing for me. And we have an obligation to make sure that no truck driver is ever put in a situation like that. And another quote which I have here from the Australian Magazine's Trade magazine, and it's from the Freya family. And among other things, they said, we don't want to be millionaires, we just want to be able to make a decent living safely. And that's repeated over and over. Another quote from the Safe Rates Summit 2011 publication. A study funded by New South Wales WorkCover shows that truck drivers are frequently forced to break driving regulations in order to make a living. It showed drivers are working an average of 68 hours a week, while almost a third are breaking all driving laws and doing more than 72 hours a week. Only 25% of drivers were paid waiting times, and almost 60% of drivers surveyed were not paid for loading or unloading. 60% of drivers admitted to nodding off at the wheel over the last 12 months. And that was a quote in that same publication. And this is from a case and it was the Crown and Randall, John Harm, 2005. Justice Graham found, among other things, truck drivers are still placed under what is clearly intolerable pressure in order to get produce to the markets or goods to their destination within a time fixed, not by any rational consideration of the risks involved in too tight a timetable, but by the dictates of the marketplace, or to put it bluntly, sheer greed on the part of the end users of these transport services. Another quote from the same publication. It was certainly an issue during my time in New South Wales politics because we were very conscious that far too many truck drivers and members of the public die on our roads in crashes that are preventable. Bob Carr, Safe Rates Summit 2009. Another quote, two quotes actually, in the same publication. Quite clearly, someone has to stand up for the ordinary truck drivers who work long hours on our highways. October 23, 2008. And it says here, Warren Truss, Leader of the Nationals, the Honourable Member for Wide Bay. And another quote attributed to the Honourable Member. I understand that there are cost recovery pressures for drivers, October 2011. And can I say that the Honourable Member has an opportunity to stand up for those truck drivers today by voting for this legislation. And also, one of the issues, and I stood here and I listened to the Honourable Member for Higgins before talk about the TWU, and the TWU that represents over 90,000 members, and talked about it as though somehow because it's involved, somehow because it lobbied to make conditions safer for truck drivers, whether they're a member of the union or not, that's not relevant. It's about safety for truck drivers, decent pay rates as well, as somehow that's not right and not proper. Well, can I say thank goodness that we do have organisations and we do have unions and we do have organisations like the TWU that are concerned with safety for their members and also members of the public, because that's what they do, and it's so important, and it's such an important role. And then I stand here and listen to the coalition members tick off on what they think's wrong, but offer very little by way of solutions to the problem of what they think is right. And I've just quoted the quote attributable to the Honourable Member for Wide Bay, the Leader of the Nationals, and saying, we have to stand up for truck drivers. Well, how do we stand up for them if we don't do things like endorse safe pay rates and a mechanism that can actually bring that into operation? There's no fine piece of legislation that we could draw up here that of itself could do it. We need a system, we need a framework, and that's what's happening. And we have to get that implemented. And some other points that I'd like to make about the bill is that, well, firstly, the government recognises the important role that owner-drivers play in the road transport industry. And truck driving continues to be the industry with the highest incidence of fatal injuries. And we know that the estimated costs to the community are $2.7 billion. That's a monetary cost. And then we have the tragic cost, because there are fatalities and there are people left with catastrophic injuries as well. Research has also found that improving remuneration leads to increased safety outcomes. In addition, there's evidence showing that many accidents in the industry result from speeding or fatigue. We've had evidence and evidence and evidence over many, many years that shows it. So it really, really is time to act. There's been a lot of inquiries. They show the same thing. So we do need to act, and we need to do this today and get this legislation passed. And the government is clearly committed to improving safety outcomes for truck drivers while ensuring the long-term viability of the road transport industry. And the the circumstances of owner-drivers have long been recognised through regulation in a number of states, because I know it's one of the issues that's raised. And as far back as 1979, inquiries have recommended that there be particular regulation for owner-drivers. It's not something that's new, and also there are existing regulatory arrangements covering owner-drivers in New South Wales, in my state, in Victoria and Western Australia. And those drivers are no less deserving of coming home safely to their families than any drivers are, whether they're owner-drivers or they're drivers. They're all truck drivers, and that's the point that we have to stay focused on. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, in commending these bills, can I say to the ministers who've been responsible in getting us to the stage where we are today, well done, and also well done to the TWU for a persistent and a sensible campaign that's going to bring us what we call safe pay rates, but safety to the roads for truck drivers, for their families and for all of us. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.